Okay, this part of the chapter, we're going to talk about a particular form of assault, domestic violence. Before I move forward with this lecture, I'm asking you to watch this video. It is a police training video on domestic violence and how officers, what they deal with. This is a raw video. It does not use any actors or recreations of domestic scenes. It is made up of actual footage from police responses to domestic violence calls. It is raw. It is tough to watch, but it's important to understand the role of power and what it plays in creating and sustaining domestic violence situations, and most importantly, the role that power plays in why women have a hard time moving away from these domestic violence relationships. So we'll join you on the other side of this. Watch it with knowing in mind that it is at times a very tough video to watch. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're back. We're going to take up domestic violence. I'm going to do some lecturing here. Just some basic statistics. If I can get there she is. All right. So domestic violence, it happens about one of 6 couples will be involved in some form of physical assault or domestic violence during the year. I would say that the data show half of domestic violence incidents are reported as simple assaults, but the actual injuries from these simple assaults are actually much more severe. Domestic violence is also largely a crime against women. It is perpetuated both by men against women, and increasingly there have been reports of, as you saw in the police video, of domestic violence between same-sex domestic partners. What 90% of these cases have in common is that women are the victim of the assault. Okay. Abuser signs. So what we're going to focus on here is who are the abusers. Abusers usually are those who have low self-esteem. They have internal feelings of powerlessness. They don't feel very effective in the world. And on the surface, we may think these people are quite successful. It's often surprising to police some of the homes they go to respond to domestic violence calls. So the men may be successful, but they still feel inadequate in some way. The abuser tends to externalize these feelings of inadequacy and bring their violence and control and exercises of power and manipulation on the people that they're closest to, their spouse and sometimes their own children. Abusers also tend to blame their circumstances on external factors such as stress, such as their partner's behavior. Oh, well, she brought it on. Having a bad day, drug and alcohol issues are also common excuses given by abusers. All right. What are some of the red flags that you should be concerned about if you see in your own relationships or in other people's relationships? Abusers tend to respond with extreme jealousy, possessiveness, unpredictability, wild mood swings, a bad temper, cruelty to animals and children, Verbal abuse, extremely controlling behavior. Abusers, oftentimes we think of abuse as being physical, but abuse can also be non-physical. It can be things like socially isolating someone from their family and friends. Other red flags are antiquated beliefs about gender roles, forced sexual contact, dependence. So one of the things abusers like to do is have people dependent upon them, because that creates power situations, right? So if you are, and in the video you saw this, the women were afraid, and when they would make a 911 call, they would say, no, please don't send the cops, because they're worried it's just going to make the situation worse, because the women don't have anywhere else to go to escape these situations. So one way that abusers tie people into these relationships and bind them to them is by making them dependent. And one way of making someone very dependent is to have a child with them. And so what we'll find is that abusers will sabotage birth control methods and in order to get the woman pregnant so that she becomes more dependent upon him. Victim blaming for things that go wrong, anything that goes wrong, very common. Some other red flags include dealing with your abusive partner at work. So they will maybe show up at your work, or if it's happening at school, show up and wait for you after class, follow you around campus. And so part of this is, this is particularly a case when against someone who is trying to push back from a domestic situation. Controlling of the finances, so again, it's about dependence, right, and power. So the abuser takes over the finances and doesn't give the victim money. Abuse of other family members, of course. Accusations of flirting or inappropriate behavior on the abused person's part. Or, well, you're having an affair on me. I see the way you and that other guy chat with each other at work. Maybe showing up at your place of work making such an accusation. Controlling what the victim wears. Demeaning them in public, particularly. Embarrassing them in front of others. Embarrassing you in front of other people. Harassment at work, etc. Now, we often think of assault as a process crime. What do I mean by a process crime? Whoops, sorry, let me back up. Can I back up from here? Page up? I cannot. So we'll just stay here and I'll talk about a process crime. A process crime is one in which the crime doesn't happen and then disappears. That's called a spot crime. Okay, most assault is a spot crime. What that means is that two people, there's an encounter, and then the two people separate, and they probably never see each other again unless there's arrest and they wind up in court. So I'll just give you an example from my life when I've been the victim of a spot crime. My wife and I were in New Orleans. We were driving home one Sunday morning back to Baton Rouge. We were down in the French Quarter. We were stopped at a stoplight. And at the last second, I happened to look up and noticed three teenagers coming at us with some bricks. And they were going to throw the bricks through our window and grab whatever they could out of the car and run. I saw them coming. One of the bricks was thrown. It didn't break the window. I stepped on the gas, ran a red light. We got back on I-10 and headed to Baton Rouge. We should have stopped and called the police and told them about it, but we were just a little freaked out. It's a spot crime. We didn't see it coming. We were victims of an attempted assault and robbery with a couple of bricks, and we managed to escape with minimal damage to our car. That's a spot crime. Domestic violence, on the other hand, is not a spot crime. It's a process crime. And what I mean by process crime is that It tends to happen multiple times, and it usually happens with escalation. So domestic violence starts off, and then it tends to get worse each new encounter that you have. And typically it takes 7 separate incidents of domestic violence, 7 different fights or abusive situations with the same partner before the victim finally leaves. Okay, that's what we mean by a process crime. Okay, a couple of other quick notes about abuse. The next one is elder abuse, as you can see here up on the screen. Elder abuse is abuse of people over the age of 60. 1 in 10 people report some form of, over the age of 60, report some form of abuse, physical or emotional, or neglect is also counted as abuse. And it's not often reported because who abuses the elderly? Almost exclusively it is their caregivers, whether it's family or people at an institution or people who are paid to take care of the people. And it's a very vulnerable situation for the elderly where when they can no longer care for themselves. They're completely dependent upon somebody else. And if that person is abusing them, they really don't have a lot of options. They don't have a lot of people they can turn to. They just have to hope and pray that somebody else witnesses it and discovers it and takes the appropriate action. It's just an awful, awful thing. Lastly, child abuse. And child abuse, I'm just going to put some numbers up here. Child abuse in the last year for which I can find data is 2014, over 700,000 victims that year alone. About a little over 25% of those are under the age of 3. Imagine that. Awful. 1 in 4 children will experience some form of abuse in their lifetime. And about almost 1,500, a little over 1,500 children died from abuse or neglect in 2014. So it's awful. It's a terrible, terrible thing.